6 months ago, the world was given Persona 5 The Phantom X, the free-to-play gacha game that for 1 year prior was only available in China, Taiwan, and Korea. Despite the series' popularity, and the announcement being one of Atlus's most liked social media posts ever, the global launch was a disaster, causing most players to abandon the game before even the first content update, and backlash so powerful Sega had no choice but to address it, issuing a slew of compensatory apology packages and making a few changes to the game in an effort to improve the quality of the service. Whether or not these changes are sufficient is up for debate, but I do at least like there is finally some sort of feedback response coming from P Studio, where previously only SMT5, Soul Hackers 2, and Raidou had made any sort of patch to improve the game's post-launch. As for myself, while I was and still am heavily critical of the game, I did end my original review by saying I was still continuing to play it in hopes it improved. With now over 400 hours under my belt, which is surprisingly still less than my time spent on Reload and Golden, I want to revisit P5X to see how much has changed over the last 6 months of updates. Here's the short and simple version. Did Persona 5X get better since launch? Categorically, yes, but I would still say it didn't really improve enough that I'd start recommending it to people. However, if you really want to experience the game for yourself, especially for the game's story, I would recommend that you wait until the game's first anniversary in late June to make your account. If it goes like the original Chinese servers, they're gonna run an event that will greatly boost your experience, and you'll also get the chance to handpick 2 characters of your choice without having to go through the gacha system, which will let you catch up with the game's power creep a little more fairly than if you had just dropped in at a random time. Keep in mind, Global is finishing up the 3rd palace, and the older servers are getting ready to hop onto the 5th. So even then, you would not have a full start-to-end experience if that's what you were looking for. Maybe if you really care about the reload and potential revival collabs, joining now to hoard gems as a free-to-play player would be a good idea, but I wouldn't really call 6 months of doing nothing but dailies my idea of fun gameplay. At the end of the day, P5X is a live service, and you have to be mindful of that when choosing whether to get involved. There's quite a bit to cover, so I want to start off by highlighting some of the aspects of my original review which were either wrong or have become outdated over time. There is absolutely no denying that the game features a slight pay-to-win aspect to it, but it seems to taper off the longer you play the game. While getting duplicates of characters makes them insanely stronger than their base form, all of the game's content is beatable with just a handful of units, most of them even being either permanently available or 4-star rarity. Some units are greater than others. For example, Cord and Futaba almost never leave my team, but once you've established a handful of characters and type coverage, you can do pretty much anything. Where the game is still very biased towards the latest character is the 2 competitive modes, and especially Sea of Souls, as the only way to reach the top 2 ranks are to score in the top 50% of the world and then the top 1000 across all players. This is still very much pay to win, but with the exception of a one-time, never-refreshing reward of 700 gems, which is virtually nothing, you can get every other reward, including gacha currency, with a completely awful score, not even trying to do good. This confuses me because it means anyone who is wailing in this game to be competitive is only really doing so for bragging rights, and I'm genuinely curious to see how long that can even last as a business model. Because if you're only pulling characters for the appeal of having them in your possession, you can completely ignore duplicates in the weapon system, as there is practically no need to min-max units for any of the game's content or any of the events with rewards. You'd think it would be the opposite, but the more I play this game, the less I feel the need to spend money on it to progress. Maybe I just don't get it, but I really don't see a reason to be competitive in this game when all that goes up is a weekly resetting number with literally 0 reward attached to it. I still think you're gonna have a harder time without a handful of really good characters that aren't available anymore, but I can safely say that I feel comfortable outright skipping most characters if I don't care for them, and probably could have gotten them anyway if I felt like gambling on the newly introduced targeted banner mode. Kompaku gems, the generic currency that you get for doing pretty much anything in the game, is something that I highlighted when I first reviewed the game. I noted they shouldn't exist because the game gave you way too many of them for it to even matter, and I was very wrong. Actually, I think they shouldn't exist because the game just doesn't give you enough of them. You can straight up just have all the necessary materials to upgrade a new character from level 1 straight to max, but the associated Kompaku gem cost increases exponentially with every tier, and it has pretty much turned it into the most important important resource in the entire game. A single character can just eat up 1 million of these things, so I become really hesitant to make the jump from level 70 to 80 for most characters in case I need the resources for something else later. I want to give a little bit of credit to the battle system now that there are more characters available. It is still very much a loop of doing the same thing over and over. In fact, the game's formulas have been solved so accurately that you can just look up a database of characters that tells you the exact specific upgrades, skill rotation, and matching party members for any Phantom Thief in the game. But there is a very slight enjoyment in squeezing out a few extra points in the high score modes by manipulating the turn order of your party and getting every buff and debuff to line up just right. That is to say, however, that outside of that specific mode, and a handful of battles with extremely specific win conditions, I have genuinely beaten every single battle, both story and event, entirely on auto mode with the same party of Cord, Futaba, a healer, and a DPS. This game is really not that hard by any stretch of the imagination once you have coverage, so it is pretty amusing when I see claims that it's too hard for the average Persona fan. It is for the most part playing itself, and doing so quite well. Originally, I said persona building is useless. I still believe this, as there are a handful of commonly agreed upon must-have personas that practically build themselves, but there are now enough personas in the game that picking and choosing the correct one matters a lot more for synergy with your party, and there is actually a reason to have those personas learn skills through training, especially to increase Wonder's speed, as most of his unique buffs are 2 turns in duration, and he needs to go first to have any hope of stacking them for higher score. With all that said, however, let's go over all that's changed since then, all that's improved, and all that's stayed the same. As a service, P5X has pretty clearly just gotten better over time. Whether it's because of a response to feedback, or because as we progress through updates we get closer to the state people are used to from the Chinese servers, the experience you get now is undeniably better than the experience we got at launch. I purposely tried to stay away from the gacha mechanics as much as possible when I reviewed the game originally, because my focus was the game itself, but it is a core aspect of the experience, and it has changed since launch. Notably, the banner system from the older servers was added, giving you the choice of trying your luck at a 50% chance to get the featured character after 80 failures, or a 100% guarantee after 110. Even more interesting is that while in the Chinese servers this targeted system reduces the drop rate of the featured character from 0.4 to 0.2, we in the global server still have 0.4 chance to pull them. This is better odds in the short term, but there is a hidden chance increase the more you pull in the Chinese servers that global does not have, and as such, the odds end up tapering off in a way that is still slightly worse for us, but not as egregiously. Characters have been releasing in the same order for global as well, with no funny business to speak of, so players also have a full year of foresight advantage in making their decisions to go for a character or not, and that's pretty good. Where global is still being somewhat disadvantaged is the standard or permanent banner, a fixed gacha banner with a handful of characters that the developers tag as standard, and in which you pull with the basic golden tickets rather than the much rarer platinum ones. In China, a character labeled standard goes into this pool immediately after their run ends, but on global, the developers deemed it necessary to withhold their addition to the permanent pool for 6 months after release, meaning that players have a much larger incentive to still use platinums for these characters while they're still available. The only character we have right now in this banner is Marion, as she released very early in the game's run, with 3 more characters currently being in the waiting list players have dubbed the 6-month jail. Where global is also slightly affected is in certain content being pushed forward by a full year. Initially just skins for Persona 5's Phantom Thieves and Wonder, we're now getting certain events and characters way earlier than intended, such as Caroline and Justine. While these events and characters are really cool and nice to have, they do put a hamper on people's foresight and pull plans, which is a little bit annoying. Because of European regulations, skins which were gacha based in China are actually bought with free gems on global. While the cost is technically higher, something that is really good for global players is that these skins are permanently available to be obtained, so there's a lot less FOMO to go for them if you're hesitant about affording an upcoming character. The task system, which is your average run-of-the-mill idle game quest system, allows you to gain a cognitite shard per week, turning into a full cognitite once you have 60. Ignoring the fact that this means it takes longer than a full year to get just 1, and a character needs 6 to max out their awareness, the global version actually added limited thieves to the list of eligible characters, and is continuing to do so slowly over time. This means characters like Joker, Makoto, etc. are actually eligible for this system without you having to pull them, which is a nice change even if the speed at at which you get shards is comically slow, as China and other servers slowly standardize their reward systems and even add the targeted banners to the weapon gacha too, fully eliminating the 50-50 gamble requirement from the entire game. Only time will tell whether Global will also adopt these improvements once the day arrives. The developers have shown that they do respond to loud negative feedback, but they'll also try to pass off changes from China that were already planned to begin with as said response to feedback. No matter what they do, it's undeniable that they still managed to pull off making the game profitable, so at least for the time being, it seems like P5X Global is here to stay. As a game, P5X has not changed in the slightest save for new gameplay modes getting added over time and minor polishing fixes. This was to be expected, but it means that while I can praise P5X's service for improving, I can't say the same for the game itself, which is just as, if not even more important than the former. The UI is pretty much all the same. There are some very welcome fixes. Text is somewhat better aligned, some things have been made clearer, such as the indicator for gifts you haven't given social links saying not given instead of cleared, which made no sense. And while the experience is still mostly the same, some newer event menus feel relatively more Persona-like, which is the level of care I expect playing a game from this series. Controller support is still pretty much a joke, and I find myself just not bothering with it anymore, but I do appreciate that in cutscenes they cleaned up the UI when using a controller, and now it actually looks pretty good. I don't understand the need for gacha games to always have your user ID in the corner of the screen at all times. It's really just distracting clutter, but it's relatively non-intrusive in P5X. I'm still waiting for the day where they add an option to just completely remove the pointless touchscreen buttons from the screen, but I'm beginning to think that's just never gonna happen at this point. Revelation cards, in my opinion, are still the worst aspect of the game by far, making players cycle through dozens if not hundreds of randomly generated cards until the one they need or want pops up. I think even the developers agree with this notion because every single event now allows you to get a set of 60 revelation selectors as a reward nowadays. Basically, you can just open a selector to get a legendary revelation card of any type in the game. The celestial sign and the random stats in the card are still random, but at least now you can quickly generate and sort through these cards on a whim without having to go into the farming mode and wasting a bunch of stamina for a chance at getting the correct type of card you want. It feels like an antiquated mechanic the developers would rather not have implemented, but they shoved it in there anyway because Hoyoverse games have it too, and now they're dealing with it the best they can. I don't quite know how to feel about this game's social sim aspect anymore. It's very similar to mainline Persona, but with the way it is right now, it very much feels like padding. While I do like the main events with your synergies, or social links, I can already see a point approaching where the experience is going to become miserable. Let me explain. There are three types of core activities that you can do in P5X. Synergy, the equivalent of social links, part-time work, and stat raising. Social link ranks are locked behind social stats. Each synergy is associated to a stat, and the higher your rank in it, the further you can also progress that synergy. In the original version of the game, I noted most valuable synergies were all centered around the kindness stat, and thankfully this is no longer the case. Each synergy also has 20 ranks, of which half are main events, like in mainline Persona, and the other half is filler, where you get just one line of dialogue, and you spam them with gifts until the number goes up. This is the big money sink of the game, and the reason you need part-time work is premium gifts can cost nearly 100k, and you can't get yen through combat like you can in mainline Persona. These activities hold a relatively good balance at first, but eventually you will reach a point where your social stats reach rank 17, and there is no more reason to keep ranking them, as even though the max is 20, 17 is the point at which it stops unlocking new content. This means that from that point onwards, the gameplay loop becomes just the same few part-time jobs and the same few fillers and gift givings, burning action points until you can finally do a main synergy event again. That's not to mention that every time the day ends, you have to go through the same morning routine of walking to class and answering a question from the teacher. This would be fine if the cutscene wasn't always the exact same and the questions were in such a small selection that I can already answer them all by instinct. It doesn't even matter if I could or not because answering incorrectly still gives you the 7 points in knowledge, so actually I just spam left click to get it over with as quickly as possible. It's very draining and I often find myself trying to do as little of it as possible every day just because of how boring and repetitive it is. To make it even more ironic, because it's so repetitive, I'll often have something on my second monitor while I go through the motions, and because whatever I'm watching there is more engaging than the game itself, when I finally do get a social link rank up, I just don't want to pick it anymore because it means I have to pause whatever it is I had in the background. This is simply just not good. When I play a game, especially Persona of all things, I want to be as focused as possible on the game and the story, but P5X just doesn't grip me because 99% of it is grunt work that doesn't require my attention. Even if I do get invested in a specific character and use the little stamina drinks to keep going, of which I have almost 100 at any time, it's best not to do so anyway because many of the best gifts can only be purchased once per week, making repeated hangouts ineffective stamina-wise. Taking my favorite video game formula of all time and somehow making it feel like a chore is an achievement, but P5X somehow managed to succeed at that. You also can't replay any scenes or events in the game, having only a text log of the game's scenes, so if you were distracted and didn't fully catch the context for something, you're out of luck. The grind doesn't really stop at city life, however. The Metaverse experience already is miserable. Save for main content, the roguelike mode, and the challenge content, P5X is genuinely no better than an idle clicker game. To keep up, every single day, and every single event has you doing the exact same trash filler battle on loop to burn stamina for a handful of rewards so you can level up your character to keep playing. The funniest example of this is whenever a Persona 5 crossover happens and a challenge boss from the original game becomes available. Yes, the boss itself is fun, but then there's stamina mode and the associated reward shop for that event. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to be playing that exact same boss on stamina mode 3 to 4 times a day to grind event coins. If the battle was actually fun, that would be one thing, but the stamina mode has an effect which greatly nerfs the enemy and makes it several magnitudes easier, because it's deliberately made so you can turn on the auto battler mode and go do something else while you wait. Palace and Mementos exploration is also horrible to go through. The maps are massive, the puzzles are repetitive, and the only reason people even go through these is because of all the gems they pack into it. Wonder still feels really clunky to control. All the random battles either suck or get skipped with the insta-kill ability, so the experience is literally just a hallway simulator that gives Soul Hackers 2 a run for its money, and I say this as someone that actually likes that game. The main puzzle solutions are also still indicated with waypoints, so if you're playing story only, the experience is simply just not fun. The P5X daily experience is logging onto the game, checking your tasks, doing 2 or 3 social sim activities, burning all your stamina in an auto battle, claiming the dailies, and then logging out. This takes no longer than 10 minutes, but you still need to do it anyway, because no dailies means no gems, which means no pulls, which means that by the time something you actually care about comes around, you're screwed. That's just not very good game design, and you're totally welcome to justify it because it's free to play or because all gacha are like this, but we live in a world where there are so many great games out there, even free ones, that willingly going through this makes me question my own sanity several times over. The few nuggets of good content this game offers do not offset all the garbage you need to go through, and I will reiterate, this game would have been way better received if it was an offline spin-off. Game mode wise, I personally really like the Metro of Desire roguelike mode, and I had a fun time getting 100% on that, finding funny synergies like turning all excess healing into damage nukes, or stacking so much damage over time debuff that it breaks the game completely. The Persona 5 events have been getting better in terms of how you progress through chapters and navigate through the palaces, which I can really appreciate. The new Velvet Twins event was a little underwhelming gameplay-wise, but it featured some really cool scenes. The most recent edition, Trials of the Astrolabe, seems like a cool idea on paper. You have a tree of challenge battles, and need to use your Phantom Thieves to go up the tree. Each battle has special effects that certain thieves can take advantage of, like bonus damage to Persona 5 characters, or buffs to characters with a specific role. Once a thief has been used up in a challenge, they're locked, so you need to use your roster in a smart way. This concept is awesome until you realize this is how they force you to keep pulling for stuff. Bigger roster means more wiggle room, which means you have a way easier time going through the mode. Thankfully, the only rewards are materials to upgrade Phantom Thieves and not actual gacha currency, but if you intend on having your characters built to keep up with future content, this is probably something you're gonna have to deal with eventually. With that said, there is one very good addition. P5X's implementation of Tycoon is really good. Tycoon, also known as President, is a classic card game that was also featured as a bonus minigame in Persona 5 Royal. P5X has brought that over, offering 2 modes, Solo, or versus computer, and Ranked, with 2 more coming in a later update, Friend Match and Endless Match. Solo works pretty much like the Royal version, playing against 3 bots and choosing the difficulty and number of rounds. Ranked pits you against real human players, with a ranked ladder you climb on a seasonal basis. Just like Sea of Souls, there are first-time gem rewards for reaching each rank, but there are zero gacha elements at play, so you can slowly take your time and just play casually with no pressure. Playing gives you coins you can use to play as other characters and customize your card skins, making all progression purely cosmetic. P5X's version of Tycoon adds an extra card, the Wonder card, which functions similarly to an 8 and a Joker combined, instantly ending the round and giving you the turn. This is pretty interesting as it lets the poor and the beggar come back from a loss, flipping the game on its head. Ranked seasons also apply modifiers to the game's rules, keeping things interesting. For example, in Season 2, the beggar is always guaranteed to have a Wonder card so they can plan accordingly. At Confidant rank 13, Masaki Ashiya provides you with the ability to count cards, giving you the ability to recall which cards have been played already and which ones are left, letting you play around the table more intelligently. Tycoon is a surprisingly good addition to the game, with no pressure, no FOMO, and no catch. While I personally wouldn't justify the entire install of the game around just this one minigame, it's really good content that didn't have to exist, but it was added anyway, and for that I give the game bonus points. I feel a lot more comfortable talking about the story of the game now that we've reached the point at which it becomes peak according to the community consensus. And, well, while I personally wouldn't call it peak, I can say the last story arc is the first time a P5X main story arc has 0 moments where I'm actively not enjoying it. The Subway Slammer arc was a joke, and the second arc was just fine in comparison, and now this third arc is beginning to head in a direction that admittedly does interest me. I think the first phase of the third palace was a little rough, and you could tell the new writer was adjusting and undoing a lot of what the original team was setting up. The arc started with a lot of drawn-out exposition, really forced character conflict, and I couldn't really take Riko's awakening seriously as she just yapped on and on, while Katayama's shadow was actively in distress the whole time. For this latest phase, there are some moments I chuckled at, like the palace ruler's backstory being borderline NTR parody, but I wasn't bored at any point. I actually quite enjoyed it and left it wanting to continue playing more. Casual interactions between the cast are beginning to feel good too as the party grows in size, and I suspect all the time we've had to hang out with them in events throughout the past 6 months really allows their friendship to set in. I started out not caring all that much about what is essentially the bargain bin Phantom Thieves, but they are starting to grow on me a little. The time loop theory is something that no one really understands at the moment, but I kind of appreciate the concept. Because P5X is gacha, you can't really game over or hit a palace deadline, so they integrated these failures into the story. It's a nice touch, and from what I've seen of the story further ahead in the China servers, the time loop also comes with an explanation for the Phantom Idols. The way it is currently raises a lot of cool fan theories, and it's really just up to the writers to deliver something that meets or exceeds those expectations. Even if the game isn't quite the best, I can give the story an adequate score for the time being. And for now, at least, I think I'm done with P5X. That is to say, I will continue playing it for the story and definitely for the Reload and Revival collabs, but unless something massive happens, I'm just going to start shifting my focus onto other things now. Persona's 30th anniversary is here for the next 9 months. Persona 4 Revival is my most anticipated game of the year, and I'm excited to cover everything I can about it. We might even see Persona 6 if you believe hard enough, but that's a topic for later. Did my opinion of the game change? I guess it did, but I once again urge you to consider the countless other games out there which are not designed with the primary objective of sucking out as much time and engagement as possible from you. P5X will always be a sore spot in Persona's history, and even though it is profitable, it's a bit ironic how being free still wasn't enough to beat the real deal.